They say love ends when life does. But what if it doesn't? What if it lingers, not in photographs or memories, but in the places that once held you both? I used to leave letters for my husband by the lake after he passed, just words to fill the silence he left behind. But one day, the lake wrote back, and that's when everything changed. This is our story, the one that began after the rain. I used to think grief was loud, that it came crashing in like a storm, wild, uncontrollable, and full of sound. But after my husband, Daniel, passed, I learned that grief isn't loud at all. It's quiet, terrifyingly quiet. It's the stillness of the house after everyone leaves. It's the sound of a chair not moving across the floor. It's the way the air feels heavier, somehow, even when nothing's changed. Every day, I tried to make peace with the silence he left behind. At first, I fought it, filling it with TV noise, with phone calls, with music I didn't even like. But the thing about silence is, it always waits for you. Eventually, it finds its way back. That's why I started going to the lake again. Daniel and I used to visit it every Sunday, rain or shine. He said the lake was a mirror for the soul, always showing you what you tried to hide. When he was alive, I used to laugh at that. But after he was gone, I understood. So, one cloudy afternoon, I drove back. The air smelled like pine and wet dirt. The kind of day that feels halfway between sorrow and peace. I sat at our old bench, the one under the leaning willow, and for the first time in months I cried. Not the kind of crying you do in front of others, the polite kind that fits neatly into a tissue. No. This was the kind that shakes your whole body, the kind that doesn't ask permission. When I finally stopped, the rain began. Soft, patient rain. The kind Daniel loved. I remembered how he used to say, "Don't run from the rain, Sarah. It only chases you harder." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small notebook. It wasn't planned. It was just something I'd brought without thinking. On the first page, I wrote, "Hi, Daniel. It's been 143 days since you left. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because saying it out loud still hurts. Maybe because the lake still feels like you." I tore the page out, folded it neatly, and placed it under a smooth stone near the bench. Then I whispered, "You always said, words don't die when we speak them. Let's see if they live when we write them." And I left it there. It became a ritual. Every Sunday, I'd write him another letter, sometimes short, sometimes pages long. I told him about the world, the weather, the small things, the cardinal that kept tapping on my kitchen window, the way the old maple tree by the driveway finally bloomed again, how I'd started sleeping on his side of the bed because mine felt too cold. It was a quiet kind of comfort, knowing my words had somewhere to go. Until one Sunday, something changed. The rain had come early that morning, soft and steady. I sat by the lake, writing as usual. But when I reached for the stone where I always left my letters, it wasn't there. In its place was a folded note, paper damp at the edges, but the handwriting perfectly clear. It said, "You write beautifully, Sarah. After the rain, the lake listens better." My heart stopped. The handwriting. It wasn't Daniel's, not exactly. But there was something about it. The curve of the letters, the way the S in my name slanted. It was eerily familiar. I looked around. The lake was empty. Just water, trees, and the hush of drizzle. I laughed nervously, convincing myself it was someone's idea of kindness. Maybe a park ranger, or some stranger who'd been reading my notes. But when I checked the paper again, I noticed something else. The ink. It shimmered faintly, as if it hadn't dried right. And the paper smelled faintly of rainwater and cedar, just like Daniel's old letters used to. I didn't sleep that night. The note stayed on my kitchen table, right beside my teacup, as though it might explain itself if I stared long enough. I kept telling myself there had to be a simple reason. Maybe someone found my first letter weeks ago and decided to leave a reply as a gesture of comfort. People can be kind like that, but kindness rarely feels this personal. I picked up the paper again. The handwriting still sent a chill through me. Not fear exactly, but that strange, weightless feeling that lives somewhere between disbelief and hope. It wasn't Daniel's hand, but the rhythm was his. The way the words curved, the way they seemed to breathe on the page. He always wrote like that. I went back to the lake the next morning. The world was washed clean. The air still smelled like last night's rain. Mist floated low over the water, and everything looked a little blurred, as if the day hadn't fully woken up yet. The stone where I'd left my letters sat there again, exactly where it had always been. I lifted it carefully, half expecting to find another note. There was nothing, just damp earth and a faint impression of folded paper. Still, I wrote again. I don't know who you are, but thank you for your kindness. You reminded me that the world still notices. Whoever you are, please take care of the lake for me. It's the last place that still feels like home. I tucked the letter under the stone, feeling foolish and tender all at once. Then I sat for a while, letting the stillness wrap around me. That evening, when I got home, the window by the sink was fogged up from the kettle. Someone, or something, had drawn a single line through the condensation. A curve, almost like a wave. Daniel used to do that whenever it rained. He'd draw lazy ripples with his fingertip and say, "See, the storm passes, but the water remembers." My heart twisted. I told myself it was coincidence. But that night, as I turned off the lights, the smell of cedar filled the room again, faint, like a memory. Over the next few weeks, the letters continued. Sometimes I'd find a reply the next day. Sometimes it would take a week. The handwriting stayed the same, smooth, slanted, and familiar enough to feel like a heartbeat I once knew. The messages were short, always gentle, always knowing. The clouds are lighter now, Sarah. You always loved the herons. They still come. The lake misses you when you stay away too long. Each one left me with a warmth I couldn't explain. And every time, without fail, I'd smell rain, even on clear days. One Sunday, I wrote a longer letter. Daniel, if this is somehow you, I don't understand how or why, but I need you to know I'm trying. I started cooking again, even though the kitchen feels too big without you. I made your tomato soup last night. It didn't taste the same, probably because I forgot the bay leaf. I still talk to you out loud sometimes, and I still sleep with your sweater. I know grief isn't supposed to be forever, but some loves don't fade, do they? When I came back the next day, the reply was waiting. The soup was perfect. You always used too much bay leaf anyway, I froze. My breath caught. The world tilted. No one could have known that. It was our running joke. How he always teased me for making everything taste like an herb garden. I sat on the bench, hands trembling, staring at the paper as tears blurred the ink. Somewhere behind the fog of disbelief, I felt something else. Not fear, but the soft pulse of comfort. like someone had reached through the space between worlds and brushed their fingers against mine. That night, I dreamt of him for the first time in months. He stood by the lake, barefoot, wearing that worn denim shirt he used to garden in. The rain had just stopped. Droplets sparkled on the grass. He didn't speak, but he smiled. I could see his lips move, but no sound came. Then he reached into the water and pulled out a folded paper. He handed it to me, pressing it gently into my palm. When I opened it, I saw only one sentence. After the rain, I can still hear you. I woke up with the echo of his smile still in my chest. That quiet, familiar curve of warmth. It was early morning, grey and still. I made tea and looked outside. The world looked soft, washed over. Without thinking, I drove back to the lake again. As I stepped onto the path, I noticed something odd. The ground was dotted with small puddles, each reflecting a sliver of pale light, like hundreds of tiny mirrors leading me forward. At the bench, the stone was missing again, but there was no letter this time, only a small pressed wildflower, a white daisy still damp from the rain. Daniel used to call them little suns. He'd say, even when the sky forgets how to shine, these remember. I sat down, holding the flower between my fingers. Maybe this was madness. Maybe grief had found a way to write back to me. But somehow I didn't care. The air was full of bird song and the distant hum of water against shore. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. I began to measure my weeks by the lake. The rest of life moved in the background, work, errands, polite conversations that never seemed to touch the ache inside me. But Sundays were different. They belonged to Daniel, to the letters, to that quiet, sacred space where words still had somewhere to go. Each week, the world changed in small ways. The air grew warmer, the trees greener, the lake brighter. And yet, the notes kept coming, always appearing after rain. Sometimes they carried little phrases that only he would know. Once the note said, "You always said the rain on glass sounded like applause." It still does. Another time, "Stop apologizing for crying. Tears are just the rain inside you." I'd sit there reading each line slowly, as if memorizing the handwriting could keep him from fading any further. And every time the same scent lingered, cedar and rain, his scent. At first I thought I was chasing ghosts, but eventually I realized something else was happening. I was healing, not all at once. Healing never works that way. It's not a sunrise. It's more like dawn light slipping quietly through your curtains. You don't notice it until you can suddenly see the room again. One evening the clouds rolled in early, thick, silver and heavy with rain. I grabbed my coat and drove to the lake before the downpour started. The world smelled like wet earth and pine needles. When I reached the bench, the first raindrops had begun to fall. Slow, soft taps on the surface of the water. I smiled through the drizzle, whispering, "All right, I'm here." "You can start the show." I took out my notebook and began to write. "Daniel, I still don't know how this is possible, or if it even matters. Maybe the world is kinder than we think. Maybe love has a longer reach than we've been taught to believe. I don't need answers anymore. I just need to know that wherever you are, you're okay. I hope you still walk barefoot through the rain. I hope the stars look the same to you as they do to me. And if somehow these words reach you, thank you for not leaving me completely alone." I folded the page, placed it under the stone, and sat back as the rain grew heavier. The air shimmered with that half-light that comes just before dusk, and the lake rippled with silver circles. Then, for the first time, I heard something, faint but real. A low hum, a voice maybe. It wasn't clear, but it was there, carried by the rain woven through the wind. I closed my eyes and listened. You were never alone. The words were barely a whisper, but I felt them. Deep, real, like the warmth of sunlight on skin after a long winter. I opened my eyes, and the world looked changed. Not brighter exactly, just more alive. The kind of beauty you can only see when you've been looking through tears for too long. I laughed softly, brushing raindrops from my cheeks. You always did have perfect timing, I whispered. That night, I lit a candle by the window and wrote in my journal. Not a letter this time, but something different. Grief is not an ending. It's a translation. Love changes language, but it never stops speaking. As I wrote the words, I realized something I hadn't before. The letters weren't pulling me backward. They were gently guiding me forward. Maybe the replies weren't from Daniel exactly. Maybe they were from that part of him that still lived inside me. The voice that knew how to be kind when I forgot how. Maybe love, once it's written deeply enough into you, finds a way to keep answering back. Spring turned to early summer. The days lengthened and the world began to hum again. I started gardening like he used to. Small things at first. Herbs on the windowsill, then flowers in the yard. Every time it rained, I'd step outside barefoot, feeling the cool earth between my toes. And sometimes I'd whisper, I'm still listening. One afternoon, I returned to the lake with a small wooden box. Inside were all the letters, mine and the mysterious replies. Dozens of pages filled with ink and rain spots and fingerprints. I sat down under the willow, the sun flickering through its branches, and spread the papers across my lap. Reading them all at once felt like walking through the past, through every ache, every soft moment, every fragile thread that held me together when I thought I'd come undone. I smiled. You were right, I whispered. The lake does listen better after the rain. Then, one by one, I folded the letters back into the box. I placed it in the water, watching as it floated out, rocking gently, sunlight glinting off the wet wood. It drifted farther and farther until the ripples swallowed it whole. And then, just as the box disappeared beneath the surface, the wind shifted, warm and sudden, carrying with it a faint whisper. You can let go now, Sarah. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, and breathed in the scent of cedar and rain one last time. It's been a year now, a whole circle of seasons since the first letter. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, that trembling morning when I found his handwriting waiting for me. And other times, it feels like a dream I almost remember, the edges softened by light and distance. I don't write to Daniel every week anymore. Not because I've stopped missing him, I don't think I ever will, but because somewhere along the way I stopped needing to fill the silence. Now, the silence feels safe. It's not empty anymore, it's full of him. I still go to the lake, I still sit under the willow, my notebook open on my lap. Though I don't always write, sometimes I just listen. The lake has changed with me. The water feels clearer, lighter, as if it's been washed clean of something heavy. When the breeze moves across it, I imagine it's carrying all the things we never said, weaving them into the sound of ripples against the shore. People pass by sometimes, joggers, couples, children chasing ducks, and they smile politely, unaware that this place is a cathedral for two. A few days ago, the first real rain of summer came. It was the kind Daniel loved, soft, steady, almost melodic. I drove to the lake without thinking. The road shimmered with puddles, and the air smelled like everything was new again. When I reached the bench, the willow leaves were dripping like silver threads. I sat for a long while before I noticed it. A small piece of paper tucked carefully beneath the stone. My breath caught. It had been months since the last one. The note was short, only a single line. "You kept your promise." I read it again and again, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. My promise. I remembered the night before he died, when I sat by his hospital bed and whispered, "I'll keep living, Daniel. I don't know how, but I'll try." Maybe he heard me after all. I pressed the note to my chest and closed my eyes. The rain had stopped, and the world was wrapped in that soft, shimmering silence that always follows. Somewhere across the lake, a heron lifted into the air, slow, graceful, wings catching the light. I watched it disappear into the clouds, and for a moment I felt him there. Not beside me, but everywhere. In the rustle of leaves, the scent of rain, the hush between heartbeats. It's strange, isn't it, how love doesn't end the way we expect it to. It doesn't vanish. It transforms, finds new shapes to live in. A whisper, a dream, a raindrop. I think that's what the letters were. Not a haunting, not a miracle, just love finding another way to speak. When people ask how I've managed to move on, I tell them I haven't. You don't move on from love, you move with it. It becomes part of your stride, your voice, your quietest thoughts. And after the rain, you can hear it again. I left one last letter under the stone that day. Not to be answered, not to be found, just to be spoken. Thank you for teaching me how to stay even after you left. Thank you for the rain, for the silence, for the small ways love still lingers. I'll keep listening. Always. Then I stood, brushed the drops from my coat, and began to walk back up the path. Behind me, the lake shimmered beneath a break in the clouds. The water caught the light like a mirror, and for just a moment, only a moment, I saw his reflection standing beside mine, smiling. Then the breeze rippled across the surface, and he was gone. But I didn't feel the emptiness anymore, just warmth, just peace. Because I finally understood. After the rain, nothing is lost. It's only changed. It's only waiting to be heard again.